and hit. And thank you all for being here. And thank you to our judges that are here and our community partners. Please go ahead and look around the room, see who all is here. Michelle is going to be training on BIPP, the Batterers Intervention and Prevention Program. And I do see Marta Balais present as well. So Michelle, I'm going to let you introduce her if that was part of your presentation. But everyone, thank you for being here. This is a training that's come out of the work group for the Gen Fellowship, addressing parenting through and after domestic violence. And for those of you who are here for a refresher, welcome. For those of you who are here to learn for the first time about what it can offer, you've got one of the best trainers in our community providing information and insight. Please go ahead and keep yourself on mute. We'll be taking questions after the presentation. And Michelle, if you'd like to get those questions during the presentation as well, please go ahead and give that instruction. And I'm gonna get a list of our judges that are here, and I will give them an opportunity to say hello at the end of the presentation as well, because we've got 3 pages and I haven't seen everyone. So I'm going to do that before I miss somebody. So thank you all very much. Michelle, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you for presenting to our community on this very important topic.
Thank you, Judge Alvarez. And I will have Ms. Marta Pelaez, our President and CEO of Family Violence Prevention Services, introduce herself first as I'm sharing my screen.
Thank you, Michelle. Welcome, everybody. My name is Marta Pelaez. Like Michelle said, I am the CEO of Family Violence Prevention Services, the Battered Women and Children's Shelter. Delighted to join everybody here this morning.
Thank you, Marta. So our presentation this month will be on BIPP courses, what they are, and how they work. To get started, my name is Michelle Hamilwright Guerrero. I am a LMFTA, meaning that I'm working on my full licensure for a licensed marriage and family therapist. I received my undergraduate degree from UTSA and my master's degree from Our Lady of the Lake University in marriage and family therapy. I've been the program director for Family Violence Prevention Services for the last 2 years, and I've been a BIPP group facilitator for the last 4. I've worked with both male and female populations, as well as our LGBTQ+ group. So to get started, I'll introduce a little bit about our agency, Family Violence Prevention Services, as well as the Battered Women and Children's Shelter of San Antonio. So our services, of course, include the Battered Women and Children's Shelter, where we house both women and children who are fleeing from domestic violence situations. Our shelter has a 24-hour crisis line, emergency shelter, case management services, individual and group counseling for both adults and children, legal services, advocacy, parent education, adult education, on-site medical and dental care, including a forensic psychologist, our on-site school program for the children staying at the shelter, transitional housing programs, and now we actually have a pet shelter. We also have counseling services where we see victims of domestic violence. We offer the Becoming Safe program, which is a psychoeducational group for women primarily, but also men who are victims of domestic violence. They also have the Women's Support Group, where women from the community can come in and receive support and validation after their domestic violence. We have individual counseling at the Counseling Services Department as well. We have the Batterers Intervention and Prevention Program, which I'll be explaining throughout this whole presentation, so I'll leave that for later. We have legal services, where primarily we work with custody cases, protective orders, divorce cases. We assess if people are eligible by being victims of domestic violence and through financial eligibility. We also provide victims compensation for crimes with the legal department. We have our court and military liaison program, which works within the court system to help provide and direct services for clients primarily in CPS and military court. Children's Services, which provides play-directed or play therapy to children at both our shelter as well as our Broadway location. Celebrating Families, which is a psychoeducational program that works with families who are in CPS primarily, but we also see families from the community. This curriculum covers drug and alcohol use, domestic violence, and healthy relationships. A Parent's Journey, which is a parenting program for victims and is also located both at our Broadway location as well as at the shelter. Community-based counseling, which is located at Haven for Hope and serves our homeless population. And volunteer services. So if anyone's looking to get extra volunteer hours, looking to help out a wonderful community organization, they can contact our volunteer services, and they could work at any of the departments that are listed above. So now we'll be discussing BIPs a little bit more in detail. The first thing I wanted to go over was Bip programs in Texas. So what's the history behind batterers intervention and prevention?
We're all programmed. I'm a grown woman.
In the beginning, 1989, during a legislative session, they created Batterers Intervention and Prevention Project. Due to the overwhelming number of women and children who were seeking services, who were looking for help in shelters, and who were just trying to get community resources, Texas found it important not just to address the victims, but also to address the batterers who are creating these victims. In 1993 to 1994, they developed the Bip Guidelines, which gave us guidance on what are some ethical practices that we can do, what are the things that victims need from batterers in these programs, looking at ways that we could have contact with the community. And in 1995, those Bip Guidelines, the first version, went into effect. As we've gone on, we have modified the Bip Guidelines. We have gotten input from other community resources, including TDCJ, CJAD, other funded and non-funded BIPs, family violence programs, including shelters or community outreach, Community Supervision and Corrections Department, the Parole Division, medical examiners, psychologists, MFTs, LPCs, licensed social workers, and other mental health professionals. With all those people meeting, they made sure to discuss the needs of not just the clients, but also the batterers, and they revised the guidelines. They also, in 2007, created a funding formula so that these programs could continue to operate and could grow in Texas. In 2009, the accreditation guidelines went into effect, which we'll be discussing a little bit later on. And in 2014 was the latest revision to the guidelines. So we'll be talking about Texas Code of Criminal Procedures and what it defines as family violence and how it established the different parameters for BIPs. So because the majority of family violence is male to female battering, it's important that battering intervention and prevention programs acknowledge gender-specific nature of that violence. When we're looking at BIPs, they only fund male towards female violence for intimate partners. We also know, based off of statistics that come out every year, that men's violence towards women is much more deadly, can cause very serious long-term effects on the victim, And it seems like there's a couple of people who are coming in and out of mute. Thank y'all for helping me with that. But it causes more long-term effects. So we see more serious forms of battering, such as strangulation, which can cause death for months after the strangulation incident. Use of weapons has been a huge issue, especially guns, from male to female battering. And all of those can cause long-term health effects as well as could result in death. So that's why we focus on the gender-specific nature of that violence. Accredited programs may also provide services to other populations, such as females, juvenile batterers, or anger management groups. For example, our program has 5 female groups, an LGBT group. We also provide services to English second language populations. So we have a Spanish speaking group currently and an ASL speaking group currently. Accredited programs also, programs receiving referrals from the court must be accredited. So this is something that is statutory. If you're receiving referrals for domestic violence for BIP, you have to be accredited. When we're talking about battering and family violence, we're looking at an ongoing pattern use of intimidation, coercion, physical and sexual violence, stalking, emotional abuse, and other tactics of control to establish and maintain a relationship of dominance over an intimate partner. So this can include a person yelling at their partner, calling them names. This can include a person withholding money from their partner and using economic abuse, rape, sexual assault, a person stalking you over the internet or in person, any sort of physical violence. Is just looking for that pattern and that happening to maintain control. When we're looking at family violence as a more broad term, it's an act by a family member or a member of the household against another member that was intended to result in physical harm, bodily injury, assault, threat, and reasonably places that member in fear of imminent physical harm. When we're talking about family or household member, this could mean a girlfriend, a boyfriend, a husband, a wife, a child, uncle, aunt, parent, somebody related by former marriage, somebody who's the biological parent of your child, foster children, foster parents, people that you're living with, housemates, roommates. As long as they're a member of your family, by blood or not, or a member of your household, it's considered family violence. Oops. Now, the mission of battering intervention and prevention programs in Texas is to eliminate male to female intimate partner violence by providing services to batterers, promoting safety for victims, and bringing about social change necessary to end battering and all other forms of abuse.
Michelle, may I interrupt?
Yes.
Were you going to share your PowerPoint?
Is it not sharing?
No.
I said screen sharing and it's showing on my end.
It's showing.
Oh,
I
it's
see
showing.
it. Yes,
It's
ma'am.
showing. Natalia,
I'm
it's
so
showing.
sorry. All right,
It's
not
okay.
showing.
It's
I
showing.
have a
It
different
is showing.
screen. Thank
It
you.
is showing. Thank you.
All right.
Not to worry, Michelle. Go ahead.
Natalia, you're about to give me a heart attack.
I'm so sorry, Michelle.
So now that we've gotten a little bit more of a basis for what battering is and what family violence is, and we take both referrals for battering and for family violence, we'll go on to intimate partner and non-intimate partner violence. So when we're looking at intimate partner violence, which is what batterers intervention and prevention programs were originally created to serve, we're looking at a man who's abusive towards his spouse, significant other, or a person he's involved with dating or an intimate relationship. This can include friends with benefits, somebody that they met for a date once. Texas does not consider women who are abusive towards their male partners or same-sex couples where one partner is abusive to another as intimate partner violence. So even though it is family violence, even though it is domestic violence, it's still not considered intimate partner violence in Texas yet. Non-intimate partner violence is when a man or a woman is abusive towards his or her family members, whether it's a parent, sibling, child, or other family member, or household members. This can include situations where a woman is abusive towards her male partner, or when same-sex couples have one partner who's abusive towards another. So in our program, we do take both IPV and non-IPV clients, as do the majority of BIP programs in Texas. There are some programs
Go to a text message. You want to send one?
that still do not have women's groups or LGBT groups. But you just might have to look around for other available agencies where they have those specific groups available. Like I said, I know that we have those groups. I know that there are some other places in Texas that provide women's batterers groups, but it may not be common in all BIPs. Now, for the accreditation process, when we're looking at accredited BIPs versus non-accredited BIPs, if they're not accredited, they're not supposed to be considered a BIP. It's very easy to find out if a BIP is accredited or not. They actually have it on TDCJ's website, available for everyone to see. They have it updated on a monthly basis. If somebody's in the probationary accreditation, you can also see that reflected on the TDCJ website. Now, if somebody's wanting to become a BIP, they have to apply to TDCJ CJAD. They need to look through the policies and procedures and sign stating that they have looked through policies and procedures. They need to pay their fees, and they have an initial desk review by TDCJ or CJAD. After that, if everything checks out, they get probationary accreditation. At that time, they can begin receiving referrals for family violence and for BIP. Once they have at least 3 people in their groups, they can apply for an on-site audit where they have a group observation, they review the guidelines on site with the BIP, and they have another desk review to check their files for compliance. After the on-site audit, if they pass with an 80% total, 100% of required guidelines passing, then they are fully accredited. At that time, if they're fully accredited, they are audited every 3 years. If they are fully accredited as well as a funded program, they'll be audited every 2 years. So accreditation status, to go into a little more detail. The probationary or provisional accreditation, that is where they're going through the application process, beginning to receive referrals. They must still complete the initial 40 hours. They must make sure that they are following BIP guidelines at this time. And they can, once they receive referrals, have that on-site audit to get full accreditation status. Now, during the probationary or provisional accreditation, they will be reaching out to domestic violence programs, whether it's the local shelter or whether it's a community program, to get a letter stating that they have a cooperative agreement. They're able to send clients to them. So typically, if people are becoming a BIP in our community, they're going to be reaching out to the Battered Women and Children Shelter to make sure they have this cooperative agreement and make sure that when batterers are referred over, they can reach out to the victims and they have a safe space to send the victims to. Now, after the probationary or provisional accreditation, they move on to becoming fully accredited. Like I mentioned before, you have your on-site audit every 3 years. You have at least an 80% benchmark score, 100% for non-negotiable guidelines. And this is something that every 3 years you need to continue passing with at least that 80% benchmark score. For fully accredited and funded programs, they apply for special funding status. They are subject to special grant conditions, which they must comply with. These grant conditions are A through M. They're audited at random every 2 years when TDCJ or CJAD comes for their audit. For both fully accredited and fully accredited funded programs, we check to make sure they're in compliance with guidelines. We check to make sure that they are in compliance with group rules. They do group audits for these programs. It's just a matter of if they're fully funded, they're under stricter guidelines. They need to have more groups audited. So they see a variety of facilitators. It can be up to 50% are audited during each audit period. And those special grant conditions have to be followed in addition to the guidelines. Now I'll go over some of the BIPP guidelines. And if I went over all the BIPP guidelines, we would probably be here for an extra 30 minutes to an hour. So I will try to make this brief and talk about the ones that would be most relevant for the referral sources. So Guideline 2 and 3 have to do with training. To be a BIPP facilitator or to have a BIPP program, you must have at least one facilitator, or you must have all facilitators and the person in charge of the BIPP program who have attended the initial 40 hours of training. These trainings are broken up into family violence and batter specific trainings that are approved by the Texas Council of Family Violence. Now, after that, you have to have continued education every 2 years. So for non-licensed staff, which would be anyone who is not an MFT, licensed social worker, licensed psychologist, or LPC, you have to do 40 hours every 2 years of continued education in family violence and BIPP. For licensed staff, it's 24 hours every 2 years, also of family violence and BIPP. So for the people seeing these batters, we need to make sure that they are trained, they're following ethical guidelines, and they continue to train on best practices. As for supervision, there is monthly supervision for all the staff in batters intervention prevention programs. That way they can staff any cases that may be difficult, get feedback from the supervisor, and once again, make sure that they're following all ethical practices. Case records, Guideline 5. Making sure you keep accurate case records and client documentations for at least 3 years post-completion or exit. Now, we do keep our files longer at FVPS because the majority of us are licensed. So we're going to comply with state licensing guidelines for keeping files, since that's the longer one. But these case records need to have information about their intake procedure, their monthly reports, their progress, case notes, etc. Confidentiality. Having release of information on file. So what the guidelines require is for us to have victim contact, if at all possible. We need a release of information for that from the clients. Making sure that we only have limited information about the victim. So we're only looking to have their name, their address, their phone number, and their age. Making sure that the clients understand the limitations of confidentiality. So if we have a release of information, we're going to be reaching out to their referral source on a monthly basis. We are going to be reaching out, offering the victim services. We are going to have the limitations that most agencies that are mandated reporters have. If we hear about child abuse or neglect, elder abuse or neglect, them wanting to kill themselves, them wanting to kill somebody else, we will report to outside sources. And then making sure they understand that we do report to the state on a monthly basis about our program, exits and completions, demographics, and that just goes towards state data on batters intervention and prevention programs. We also let them know that if we are subpoenaed, their information may go to court or the facilitator will speak on the information in court. Guideline 11, program duration. So it is a minimum of an orientation, which is the intake process. and 18 weeks of group, 36 hours of group. So that's 18 weeks at 2 hours a week. Best practice for the state of Texas is 52 weeks in group. So we can have clients be referred over for 20 weeks, 30 weeks, 50 weeks, 52 weeks, whatever the referral source feels like is necessary and whatever we feel like is necessary after the client attends the program. Guidelines 12 through 14, 16 through 17, 20 to 23, all talk about program format. So we have to make sure that we have an assessment and orientation. The assessment is to make sure that the client is appropriate for group. Clients could be seen as not appropriate for group at that time if they have a disability that prevents them from attending. So for example, we have had clients who have had seizures. They have not been active taking their medication for seizures. And because they are not taking their medication, they are having seizures regularly. In that case, they may not be appropriate for our program at that time until they talk to their doctor and make sure that their medication is going to prevent them being in harm's way during taking the sessions. It could also be that the client's currently using drugs and alcohol, and we may go back to the referral source, let them know that they are not appropriate to attend until they have gone to inpatient treatment or they've gone to outpatient treatment to work on their addiction. The orientation lets them know what group rules are, what to expect coming in the program, and goes over confidentiality. After the orientation, they have a signed copy of the rules. So if they ever have any questions or if they ever have any concerns, they can go back and view those. Those are also discussed in group on a periodic basis, as well as during the orientation process. Group size. So we are limited on the number of men or women we can have in group. When it's in person, it's a group size of 15 people for one facilitator or 20 people for two facilitators if you're co-facilitating. Now, since we've been online, they have lowered that number for online groups. It's gone down to 10 people per group when facilitating online. The structure of the program, so making sure that we follow group check-in procedures, making sure that we have a minimum number of sessions, making sure that we are following the curriculum that we're using in the group, accountability, and this is a very important guideline because batterers intervention and prevention programs are based off of accountability. With this guideline, it talks about how we need the client to give us certain information to be compliant with BIP. That includes what was the client's most recent use of violence in their relationship? What are some of the past ways this client has used violence? What's the current relationship with the victim? Are they still in contact with the victim, and is this a safety concern for us? One of the reasons why accountability is also so important is because we don't always have very much information on what's going on for the client or where to direct services. We go over a lot of different topics, and if a client comes in and says there's no domestic violence, they've never yelled, they've never harassed somebody, they've never called a person out their name, hit them, done anything along those lines, it's like going to a doctor and saying that you have absolutely no issues, your health is perfect. They're not going to be able to treat you for what's going on because you don't have any presenting problems. Same thing goes for our program or for any type of counseling services. If they're presenting with no problems, we're not sure what we can treat. Now, with that, like I said, we accept any type of domestic violence. It's not always just physical. We don't look for just specific types. We're looking for anything that could be related to power and control over their partner or over other family members. What's helpful for us as a program and for other BIPs as a program is having information on what went on for this person for them to be sent to our program. So for example, CPS sends us information about what it was that happened using a form called the 2036. For probation, we might have information because of their charge on their terms and conditions. If they have a choking strangulation charge, we're going to be asking them questions related to choking and strangulation. We also need to have clear rules about exit and completion. What is it that allows a person to be exited from the program? So it could be number of absences. It could be if a person is not complying with program rules. It could be if a person decides to self-exit, because the clients do have that right to remove themselves from the program, or a number of other reasons. Completions, what makes a successful completion? So we look at, is a client making the progress that we're hoping to see in the program? Is the client completed all of their minimum sessions? Has a client completed their completion packet? If they don't meet all of those requirements, we can't give them a successful completion. And there have been times where we've extended the client's time in the program because they haven't met the requirements that our program puts in place for completion. Reporting to referral sources. So we do have to report to the referral sources within 5 business days of them successfully completing orientation, of them attending each month. So on the 5th business day of the month, referral sources will receive a report, and within 5 business days of their exit or completion. Individualized plan. So if the client has special needs, we're going to report that over to the referral source and work on that with each client. Those individualized plans may look like the client attending counseling in addition to BIP, the client being referred to parenting in addition to BIP. And that's something we would go over based off of their orientation, as well as any presenting problems in group. And then, of course, making sure that we have standardized group rules that we're following with the clients. These group rules might vary depending on the program, but they will all have information about what a successful exit or what a successful completion looks like, what an exit looks like, what behavior would be deemed inappropriate in group, accountability, number of absences, payments, things along those lines. The curriculum. So we have to use a state-approved curriculum per the Bip Guidelines. These curriculums are evidence-based. Many of them were created towards the beginning of the domestic violence movement, and making sure that our curriculum is focused on victim safety, domestic violence as a choice or a behavior, and looking at the belief systems, the culture, or societal norms that contribute to domestic violence being an issue. Victim contact. So we are required to contact victims within 5 working days of orientation, as well as exit and completion. This victim contact usually includes safety plan, information about the program and what we do. It lets them know that we don't guarantee that the batterer will be nonviolent towards them, and it offers them services within the community so that if they need help, they can get that. It gives them our contact information as well. So if the batterer is acting inappropriately, whether it's they're violating their no harmful contact or violating their no contact order, whether it's they've continued that abuse in the relationship, or something else, they can call us and let us know so that we can modify our plan and possibly.
I saw Brenda the other day.
Now, beyond the victim contact, I mentioned referral reports a little bit earlier. Just to let y'all know a little bit about what's on the referral reports, that has information on whether the clients are accountable or not in group, if they're participating, if they're being respectful, how resistant they are to the topics we discuss. Usually we give some information about what topics were discussed in the program, any concerns we may have about the client, or if we see the client complying with program rules and regulations. It's very objective. We do that as much as possible because, once again, we see them 2 hours a week, 1 time a week, for only a limited number of weeks. We don't know what's going on at home. We don't know if what they're telling us is just their version of the story or if there's something else going on. So we don't want to give information about, we feel like they're being nonviolent towards the victim, or we feel like they're safe to be around their children, because we don't know that information. So it would just be about what's going on in group, just be about what they're reporting to us, and very clear on the fact that we can't guarantee that they're being nonviolent outside of here. Referral system. So keeping documentation on the referrals that are sent over to our program. So depending on the program, their referral system may look a little different. It can be a letter from a community resource saying that they refer them to our program. It could be terms and conditions of probation, certificate of parole. It could be CPS sending over their paperwork for a referral. We do have to keep that on file to show that they were referred from a certain source. Along with the referral systems and keeping track of who's referring and that referral paperwork, we also must provide training and have collaboration with the community and the referral systems. So whether it's a training like the one today, whether it's reaching out and talking to a caseworker, a probation officer, a judge, or whoever has any questions, we're going to do that. So what are some things we may need from referral sources? So these are just some helpful things that y'all can do as attorneys, judges, probation officers, or whoever's attending on the call today. We want to know who the victim is. So this has to do with our guidelines. We do have to have a victim's name, the victim's age, and their address on file. If we don't have the address, we get a sworn statement. We are allowed to do that with our guidelines, but we still need the information about who the victim is. Sometimes the clients will not provide this information, which is why it can be helpful if the referral sources send this in their documentation. I know probation does this. So they typically have no contact or no harmful contact with the victim. And in that case, we talk to the clients on their orientation and we discuss that this person is who's listed as victim. And sometimes that helps them take more accountability. Sometimes it doesn't, just knowing that we have that information. What the batterer is being referred for. So once again, I mentioned on probation's paperwork, they have a statement on what the charge was, whether it's assault bodily injury, whether it's choking strangulation, assault with a deadly weapon. That gives us an idea of where we need to look for the domestic violence. We also get a lot of information from CPS. They tell us what the allegations were. They tell us the affidavit of removal. And with that, we can talk to the clients and let them know that this is what they're being referred here for and that we want to work on these issues that are being presented to us. Typically, if we're getting referrals from probation, we're wanting the terms and conditions. From judges, so for protective orders, for divorce cases, we're looking for those court orders that refer them to a BIP, certificate of parole, safety plan from the CPS, CPS's form, the 2036, their pretrial diversion paperwork, or an attorney recommendation, and why the attorney is recommended to our program.
Are you there?
It's also helpful for us to know how many sessions you require. As I mentioned before, it's a minimum of 18 weeks, but it could be a maximum of 52. So if you have a client who you feel like is high risk going into a BIP program, and you want them to attend 32 sessions, or you want them to attend the full 52 sessions, send that information over to us. Being more specific helps us know how serious their case is. If they have the minimum of 20 or minimum of 18, we do a minimum of 20. Then we'll have them do that minimum number unless something presents while they're in the program. Does the client need accommodation? So this could be in the form of, do they have a disability? Is there a mental health concern? Is there drug and alcohol use that would be a concern for them attending the program? And is a client engaged in other services at the time of orientation? It could be important for us to know if a client is receiving psychiatric services. That could be relevant to them attending group. It could also be important for us to know if they're attending drug and alcohol services. Once again, could be relevant to their group process, could be relevant to how they understand information in group. If they have other individual counseling services, we don't want to refer them to individual counseling with one of our counselors while attending individual counseling with somebody else, because that would be a conflict of interest and an ethical issue. So I know I mentioned before that the curriculums need to be victim focused, need to be state approved, and they need to look at domestic violence as a choice or a behavior. So I have listed some of the approved curriculums in Texas. So if you're looking for a BIP program and you see that they're using a curriculum that may not be on this list, you might want to talk to them about it or bring it up to TCFE or refer them out to a different program, because they may be using a curriculum that is not evidence-based, does not have a lot of data backing it up, or that may not be helpful to the victims in the community. So the Duluth curriculum is one of the gold standards, as well as the Emerge. These are some of the curriculums that were developed in the beginning of the domestic violence movement. The Duluth curriculum is what Family Violence Prevention Services uses. Now, with the Duluth curriculum, you're looking at domestic violence as well through the site of the Power and Control and Equality Wheels. I'm sure if we worked in domestic violence, we've probably seen the Power and Control and Equality Wheels. I do have them coming up in case you're not as familiar with those, or you may not have had as many domestic violence cases in the past. The Power and Control and Equality Wheels were actually developed by the Duluth program, and they were based off of what the victims in their shelter told the counselors, whether it was telling them about the types of abuse they'd endured or telling them about what they needed from a healthy relationship. So Duluth is very victim-centered in its approach. Emerge curriculum also developed very early on, and this curriculum looks at domestic violence as a learned behavior. They also look at how oppressive circumstances can contribute to the issue of domestic violence, whether it's racism, whether it's sexism, or basically any other type of ism. Men at work. So this is focused more on societal issues and change and how violence affects the lives of the women that they're close to, whether it's their mothers, their sisters, their children. So coming more from that approach, all of these curriculums do focus on victim safety, do focus on violence as a choice, and do focus on the beliefs, the culture, and societal issues that contribute to domestic violence. It's just looking at them through different scopes and with heavier focuses on one area or another. The Women Who Use Force Turning Points curriculum, and this is the only one they have that it specifically focuses on women who use force. This one is developed to look at how women who have had violence used on them, whether they're survivors or victims, use violence as a response. So lots of times we see women who come into our program, they're actively being battered, and they get to that point where they decide to hit the other person back or take a knife to that person. We also see a lot of times for women referred to our program and other programs where they have been victims of sexual violence, of physical violence growing up. And then once they get in a relationship, they repeat those patterns on their partner. So that's more of the focus of Women Who Use Force. Addressing Fatherhood with Men Who Batter is a supplementary curriculum that goes along with the Duluth curriculum. So they have very similar viewpoints. It's just more specific for fathers. Fathering After Violence, Futures Without Violence curriculum is going to be looking at how they can transform their relationships with their partners and survivors, how they can work on co-parenting, and how violence affects their children. This curriculum looks at men renouncing the use of violence throughout the program and tries to give them nonviolent alternatives like all the other programs described. The Equality Wheel and the Power and Control Wheel. So once again, I'm sure a lot of y'all are familiar with this, but I will still show it on here for you in case you are not as familiar with the Power and Control and Equality Wheel. This can be a great tool to show to victims so that they can identify what behaviors are abusive in their relationship. Along with the men, we go over the Power and Control Wheel during intake. We have it posted in our group rooms, and it helps men identify that these are abusive behaviors. The Equality Wheel, on the other hand, gives them healthy alternatives. So the Equality Wheel is what we're looking for in their relationships and what we're looking for in their changes of behavior. Group sessions at FEPS. So now that we've covered a little bit of the history of BIPs, accreditation process, and what to look for an accredited program, I'll tell y'all a little bit more about how the sessions look. So once again, we follow the Duluth curriculum. You may see slight differences depending on the curriculum that's being used, but for the most part, BIP groups are going to be pretty similar. At the beginning, clients are going to check in with their name, victim's name, and they may have a check-in that discusses what their week was like, what went on for their case. We also talk sometimes about the client's use of self-care. So are they doing things to make sure that they're in a good, healthy mental state? New clients share what they did to their victim. So some programs may have you bring in police reports for this. Some programs may rely more on batterers' accounts. But either way, talking about that use of violence. The other group members are encouraged to chime in and to talk to the new group member. Also, if we hear any inappropriate comments, or if we hear a lack of accountability based off of minimizing, denying, and blaming, or justifying, then we may step in and make comments to help them take more accountability. We also understand that first session can be scary for a lot of the men coming in. They're having to reveal sometimes the moment that they're most ashamed of in front of a group of other men that they don't know. So we just try to do our best to make sure that that process goes smoothly. I think it's very helpful for the men who are starting sessions to hear from the other men in group. Sometimes they'll encourage them to share more. Sometimes they'll give examples if their story is related to the new gentleman's story. Sometimes they'll help them take accountability and tell them, well, you said you kind of did this, just say you hit her. Clients talk about the group from the week before. We do a quick review, letting them fill in the new people or the people who may have missed the week before. And then we move on to the topic for that week, and the clients begin group discussion. Now, our group topics are going to be nonviolence, non-threatening behavior, respect, trust and support, honesty and accountability, responsible parenting, shared responsibility, economic partnership, sexual respect, and negotiation and fairness. This covers a wide array of topics. We make sure that we go through these topics 2 to 4 days. So 2 to 4 weeks realistically. That way the clients are clear on what the topic is, what the abusive behavior looks like, and they discuss the healthy alternatives. When we're looking at the equality wheel side, which would be the healthy behavior, whether it's nonviolent, sexual respect, economic partnership, honesty, and accountability, we're getting an overview for that first week about what the topic is, asking them questions about what the topic looks like, what are behaviors that are related to the topic, what are some healthy choices that they've made that are related to the topic, and what are some challenges they face when using that topic, whether it's nonviolence, non-threatening behavior, or whatever else in their relationship. The clients may fill out a equality log, looking at what their actions were, intents and beliefs and effects, and how past violence contributes to that. The power and control wheel. So when we're looking at their use of violence and unhealthy or abusive behaviors, we're going over the power and control log. Clients discuss controlling behavior. They may look at vignettes and they may reflect on how those themes resemble their own actions and relationships. I do actually have an example of the vignette, but I think we're running low on time. Judge Alvarez?
Hi, I'm sorry. I was sending you text to try not to interrupt. We have a few minutes left if you'd like to show the video, but we do have some great questions in the chat. And I'd like to also encourage folks, if you have a question, please put it in the chat. We are capturing those questions. And if we don't get to all of them, we will be finding a way to get you the answers. Thank you for this presentation, Michelle, and for the discussion to come. You've got minutes.
I will show a small piece of this. Typically the videos that we show in group on the controlling behavior are going to be anywhere from about a minute to 5 minutes long, and then we'll discuss them afterwards. The example I brought up is having to do with coercion and threats. And like I said, I'll just show a small clip it, so not the full video.
Just give me some time, Steve. We got it up. Get off of this property. All right. We'll bounce back. The kids will bounce back. Kids learn. We'll talk to them. We'll tell them about what happened. It'll be fine. But you can't take out a court order against your own husband and then expect everything to be fine. What was I supposed to do? I have to look out for myself as well. I know, but we gotta talk. I don't want to talk. I'm through talking, Steve. Yeah, well, if you're through talking and you're through, then we're through. We're finished. Get off of this property. Get off of this property. All right, I'm off. You step on this property again and I'll call the sheriff. I will. Jesus Christ, why don't you, then fine, go call the sheriff. You're not getting 1 red cent from me, you understand? You're not getting any money from me.
So I know that's just a few seconds of seeing, but hopefully y'all were able to hear. Typically it's looking at controlling behavior. This one has to do with coercion and threats. You heard the guy saying the kids will bounce back after what happened. She's telling him there's a court order saying he can't be on the property as he keeps getting closer to her, and there's lots of yelling going on. So when we're in group, we're looking at the full video, we're exploring what are the man's actions, what are his behaviors, what do they notice about his body language, his facial expressions, how close he is to the victim. And then we look at what was the intent behind that behavior. So was he trying to get back together with her? Was he trying to get charges dropped? Was he trying to skip over the violence and go to that honeymoon phase? And the beliefs behind it. So the beliefs might be, she's less than him. She doesn't deserve to be treated well. She put me in jail, so it's her fault. And then exploring how that affects the clients in their situations, if they have a similar situation, or the man in the video. Then we go over the equality wheel for the last portion, talking about healthy alternatives, possibly role plays, and how those situations affect their own lives. I do have the Q&A. Sorry, I'm trying to get at least a couple minutes for that. I also have my information. So if you need to reach out to me through email, that's the best way to contact me. I'm more than happy to answer any questions. We also have the FVPS webpage. There's information about all the programs on there, as well as forms and ways to get referrals in. I have our phone number, our crisis helpline for the shelter, and then the national hotline for domestic violence information. Thank you, Judge Alvarez.
All right. No, thank you very much, Michelle. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop the screen sharing. And I do want to recognize the judges that are here just by name. We have Judge David Canales, Judge Cynthia Chapa, Judge Helen Petrie Stowe, Judge Michael De Leon, Judge Monique Diaz, Judge Rosie Speedlin Gonzalez, Judge Stephanie Boyd, Judge Kimberly Burley, Judge Velia Mesa, and Judge Grace Uzumba. Thank you all for being here and for our community. So you know, our judges are actively participating and engaged and obtaining training to better address issues of domestic violence. And we have Patricia Castillo from the Peace Initiative, one of our very active nonprofit partners, all working to try to make sure we have a better community response to this issue. So Michelle, very quickly, we are after 1. So thank you all. For those who want to continue to be engaged in the conversation, again, please put your questions in the chat. And if you'd like a copy of the PowerPoint, please take down Norma Cavazos' email address and send her an email requesting that. We will get it to you. But let's get to the questions. Judge Mesa had a question asking if Family Violence Prevention Service offers any services for defendants on probation for assault on the elderly.
Yes.
And then the question is more identified in the chat, but that's the question. Does Family Violence Prevention Service offer services for defendants on probation for assault on the elderly?
Yes, Judge Alvarez, we do. I see Marta looks like she wants to say something as well. But we actually have several active clients right now with assaults, bodily injury, elderly charge. And once again, as long as it's family violence, whether it's IPV or non-IPV, we are happy to take them and work with them in our program. So Marta, did you have any other comments?
Not other than confirming everything that you just said, Michelle. We have had an increase in the number of seniors that are referred to our programs, most concerning to the shelter. It is very difficult for a mother to come forth and press charges against the son or daughter who is inflicting the pain on her. So yes, the answer is yes. There is a question there regarding anger management, Michelle, that I know you can address. There's someone.
We're gonna get there. I was trying to go ahead and present the questions as they were posted in the chat. So
Okay.
Gabriel here at our DRO office, what is the distinction between IPV and non-IPV? And does that affect what funding can be obtained, or does that affect what services can be offered? So I'm not sure if Michelle or Martha, if you wanted to take that question, please.
So
Michelle, please.
As we mentioned before, BIP programs are only created for IPV. So our funding from TDCJ CJAD is for intimate partner violence. Now, we as an agency see that there's a need for other services. So we luckily are able to provide services for other populations, non-IPV being one of them, as well as the female groups, which do have to be separated out from the men's groups. Along with that, just the services are the same. They are integrated into the same groups. Part of the reason for that is even if somebody's referred over for non-IPV, lots of times they still have IPV going on in their relationships. They just haven't been caught. Now, when we're looking at IPV, we're also looking at how it affects the families in the household. So if we have an IPV client who doesn't have a non-IPV charge, lots of times we're still seeing that there's issues about child abuse, child neglect, and some of those other issues we cover in the non-IPV parts. So having both in the groups together can help because they share those different experiences. They pick up on the times when they're being violent towards their partner or they're being violent towards their kids that may not have been caught up legally. And we make sure our group discussions are focused not just on intimate partner violence, but family violence as a whole. Hopefully that answered your question, Gabriel.
All right, thank you. And the next question is from Judge Diaz. Is there an assessment you conduct or could conduct to determine if a participant should complete more than 20 weeks of BIP? And if so, do you do that on your own, or do you require specific language in a court order stating the term of the course is to be determined based on your assessment?
So we do not have a specific assessment in place for the number of sessions. We start off with a minimum of 20. Now, reasons why we would add additional sessions is if a client is behaving inappropriately in group. So if they're coming in and making comments, and I'll give an example that's happened for some of our groups in the past. A man who came in, gave a payment towards his final session and said, had too much, said, keep it for the next time I hit her. Or a man who's coming in and saying on their 15th, 16th session, women are in no way equal to men. I don't care what you say, but that's not true. In those cases, we understand that those beliefs, they can take a while to change and they may need more sessions in order to work on some of those unhealthy belief systems that lead into domestic violence. As for other reasons why we would add additional sessions, it would be based off of continued physical violence, breaking protective orders, breaking no contact orders, or other things like that that put the victim in harm's way. In that place, we would add additional sessions so that we can monitor them for a longer time and work more thoroughly on their issues that have been identified. Now, there is one place that I know of in Texas that does assessments to say of how many weeks, and luckily it's down the road in Austin. I can get that information for that place, but I don't know of any other programs that do an assessment saying how many weeks need to be given to the clients based off of their risk, besides the place in Austin.
All right, thank you. And the next comment, the question was more of a comment that the STOP curriculum was not on your slide, and it is on the TDCJ website as an approved curriculum. Do you know if there have been some changes or if that was an oversight? And again, STOP, S-T-O-P, all capitalized curriculum is what's referenced in the chat.
I have heard of that curriculum. I would have to do a little bit more digging on that. I went based off of TCFE because they're typically the ones we go through for curriculum approval. And then they bring it up to TDCJ. But I'll double check on that. That might have been an oversight, or it might be an older curriculum that just wasn't mentioned by TCFE.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. And then we've got a question regarding cost of BIP per week or for the minimum of 18 sessions, and that answer's already been established in the chat.
Yeah.
State it for the recording. It's $25 a week and it's a minimum of 20 sessions, not 18.
Yes, 18 is a state minimum. Our program does a minimum of 20. Other programs may have other minimums. So I know there's at least one other program in Bexar County that does a minimum of 24. Other cities might have different minimums as well.
All right, thank you. And the next question comes from Judge De Leon. Due to COVID, BIP was being offered online. What is the status of BIP being offered online as we move forward? And I guess the distinction and recognition that in-person BIP has a much better group dynamic for the participants, but what have you seen with regards to online BIP course offerings?
So with the online BIP, right now we have a waiver in place through or until March the 1st. At this time, a lot of agencies have expressed concern going back with the Omicron variant. So there was an application submitted to possibly extend the waiver. We are waiting on confirmation from that. Hopefully within the next couple weeks, we'll let you know if we're able to extend that time online or not. A lot of our clients are coming in sick. I know I still have groups, and I had 4 clients in one group yesterday out of the 10 clients in group who actively had COVID. So we want to keep ourselves safe. We don't want to put a delay on the groups. We don't want to have groups on hold because people are testing positive and exposing other group members. We will keep referral sources updated if there are any changes to the waiver, or if we go in person. Now, as for the group dynamics, it's been interesting. There have been new challenges that have arisen with online groups, such as confidentiality becoming more of a problem because people are at home. We make sure that the clients know if they break confidentiality, they will be dismissed for the confidentiality of other group members. Same thing with like situations where clients are driving, which has been an interesting problem that we have found out, and we dismiss them because we tell them it is illegal to be on your phone and driving in Texas. The men's groups, we have actually seen men being more open about participating, and I don't know if it's because they feel more comfortable with more distance to be more emotional and vulnerable. In the women's groups, we've kind of seen the opposite, where they are more reserved on the online sessions. Either way, the biggest issues might be distractions. We make sure to mitigate that as much as we can. Clients are told the group standards. They are not allowed to be doing other things during group. If they are, they can be dismissed or they could get DNCs, just like if they were in person and they were decided to pull out their phone and start playing on it in group, they would get dismissed or have a DNC. We understand we can't address all of those concerns at all times because we can't see everything that's going on, but we still do our best to make sure that's taken care of. For the most part, it's just making sure that they're engaged and making sure that we're providing engaging material and letting them know that they are needing to participate, and that usually keeps them on topic and active in the group, despite being online instead of in person.
Thank you. Thank you, Michelle. The next question is from Judge Petrie Stowe. The question is there ever an opportunity in the course for the victim to engage in some of the counseling along with the aggressor if they are willing? And I guess just to clarify, if there's a parallel group session that perhaps victims of domestic violence are encouraged to attend that may counter what
so victims
complement, not counter, I'm sorry, complement.
Victims would not be appropriate to go into those group sessions. Much like couples counseling, it's an ethical concern that if something gets brought up or said, it will result in the victim being put in harm's way when they go home or when they leave the session, or the victim feeling they can't express themselves and then having that, issue of the perpetrators continuing using power and control against the victim in the group session. We do not advise couples counseling. We don't advise having the victims in there with the perpetrators. Now, what we do have with the Duluth curriculum is videos that have taped victims speaking about their experience. We use that as kind of an empathy training for some of the men in group, and to share some of the experiences women have gone through from battering and the effects it's had on them. Women are encouraged to attend counseling, Becoming Safe, or other programs, but we can't require that they do. If they go to the Becoming Safe program at FVPS, then they will get complimentary information, talks about safety planning, making sure that they're choosing healthy relationships, working through trauma, things along those lines.
And I guess, yes, to clarify, that was my question, if there was like a parallel, and it sounds like there is. Of course, it has to be voluntary, but just wondering how they would get information about it.
So that gets sent in the victim notification that we send on after their intake within those 5 business days and after their exit or completion within 5 business days. Like I said, we offer them community resources. So if they need to get legal help, we have some legal options for them to look into. If they need victims counseling, we refer them to the shelter, to Becoming Safe. And we make sure that they have those community resources available that would complement the men going through the BIPP program, and hopefully make it a safer environment for the whole family.
All right, thank you. And thank you, Judge Petrie-Stowe, for that clarification. I thought I knew what you were meant to ask, but you asked it better. Thank you. And for Andrew, we have for non-IPV referrals, BIP is required for any family violence probation, but it's not geared towards non-IPV. Is there an alternative that would be likely to be accepted as fulfilling the requirement that may be, I guess, more geared towards non-IPV violence?
I would say for all of our programs, we make sure to have an equal focus on IPV and non-IPV cases. Like I mentioned before, even though BIP is technically for IPV clients, like our topics are applicable for both populations. So when we're looking at violence or non-violence as a topic, we're looking at what is family violence? What are these actions that you've done towards the partner, towards the kid, towards other family members? When we're looking at honesty and accountability, it's something that can apply to all the clients, minimizing, denying, and blaming. And actually, we see more minimizing and denying when it comes to child abuse cases. Same thing goes for like responsible parenting. We have a whole unit on responsible parenting in our curriculum where we focus more on the men and how they parent their child and how they interact with their child and how they can build healthy parenting relationships with their child. And then we focus probably a smaller amount on co-parenting just because so many of the men have some sort of history of child abuse that they perpetuated. And so it's really something we have to focus on in the groups to make sure that those children are safe. A lot of our clients are referred by CPS or have had CPS cases in the past. So hopefully that explains the only alternative they have for BIP for family violence is a licensed professional counselor, licensed social worker, or licensed marriage and family therapist who is experienced in domestic violence. They recommend that for counties that don't have BIP available. Some counties may have separated out IPV and non-IPV groups. But we've also found that if we separate those out and limit the number of times we can have non-IPV, lots of times they can't fit that schedule. And it makes it difficult for them versus the 23 groups we have available currently where they can be fit into any of those 23 groups.
Okay. And Michelle, are you aware of a program that kind of just provides BIP for non-IPV offenders?
Not here and not in any other place. And part of the reason is they don't get funding from TCFV for non-IPV cases. So lots of programs aren't even able to accommodate non-IPV cases or female violence cases because they don't get the funding. Like I said, we're very lucky at Family Violence Prevention Services that we're able to provide the different types of services for clients, and we're able to accept non-IPV clients, but not every place has that capability.
I'd like to share very quickly that we do offer domestic violence classes at Frontera Healthcare Network at $25 a week. There's 10 classes. You get a certificate at the end. For the level of acuity that is not at a BIP program, we also have anger management for males and females that are 10 weeks, and you get a certificate at the end. And we also have a family violence class, and that would be for males and females who are both aggressors. Like, for example, in a CPS case, and the
Dr. Amos, I'm sorry to cut you off.
Okay.
And go ahead and include the website for your organization, but we have like 11 minutes before it's absolutely where I have to end the session. And
that's okay.
I appreciate the 70 plus folks that are here to continue the conversation. We have one more question.
Okay.
Do the sessions become more complicated when participants are new immigrants from other countries or cultures? And during the BIP, how are you able to break age-old and traditional accepted notions of gender roles when you're talking about shifting mindset for equality?
So that is a wonderful question. We actually do have a lot of clients who are immigrants, especially in our Spanish group. So our Spanish group has clients from Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, Mexico, that are living in Texas now, but have all immigrated from those places. We also have resources with the power and control wheel that are specific to different cultures. So there is an Arabic power and control wheel that we have used for Arabic clients in the past. We don't have any Arabic speaking clients currently, but it's been very helpful looking at those differences in culture for that population, especially because a lot of them are Islamic in faith. Another thing that we do that helps cover some of those cultural issues that may be specific to a certain population or to certain people coming in the Spanish groups is looking at privilege. So when we talk about male privilege in the Spanish group, obviously you have to talk about machismo since it's so prevalent. We talk about different types of privileges when we go over male privilege, because we also understand that those different contexts of privilege can affect their relationships with their partner. If we have an African-American man who's dating a white woman, that's going to look different, and that's going to have certain areas where the man will have privilege for male privilege, but the woman may have privilege as a white woman. So hopefully that addresses some of the issues with the cultural concerns and the immigration. It does take a lot of work to go through changing cultural beliefs that are very ingrained. I also think that's why it's important to have these programs and these services for a longer period of time, because you don't just change your cultural ideas or start to think differently about these topics that you've learned growing up and that you've had with you maybe 20, 30, 40 years overnight. It takes time. I think also having other men in group who share those cultural values, who are telling you like, that's not cool, that doesn't work. It really has hurt me to do these things, is helpful as well. Now, I also wanted to address one thing that I didn't get to in the conversation, but BIP and anger management are very different. They look at different topics, and they are not going to have the same intents or belief systems behind them. So when you're dealing with domestic violence, you want to make sure that you're referring over to a BIP, because it is very specialized and it has a lot of data to back it up as being effective for making changes in batters and reducing recidivism. So that's just something else to think about. Obviously, if people have anger management issues, you want to refer them over to anger management, like if they're going out and screaming at people in public. But domestic violence has that different belief system behind it, and lots of times is not that uncontrollable anger, but a choice to have power and to dominate over another person, whether it's a kid, whether it's a partner, or somebody else.
Thank you, Michelle, very much for that primer on the distinctions between anger management and the education that we are trying, or that BIP is trying to provide regarding how to address family violence, domestic violence. Thank you all very, very much. I put it in the chat. Let me please just include an invitation here to you all and to those who will watch on recording later. We are meeting 1st, 2nd, 4th, and 5th Thursdays of the month to address parenting and domestic violence. We have national experts who are supplementing our discussions. And the first 2 Thursdays, the 1st Thursday and the 2nd Thursday of February, we will be doing a resource mapping of our community about what resources we have to meet our community needs at that intersection, at parenting and domestic violence intersection. So please join us. I included the Zoom. The ID is 976-6723-3457. Also, please get involved with the Collaborative Commission on Domestic Violence, the Judiciary Committee, the Nonprofit Committee, and all of the committees on the collaboration are doing great work. And Michelle, to you, thank you so very much. It was such an informative presentation, And to all of you who are engaged and part
Yeah.
of our ongoing education efforts, thank you for attending. I hope you all have a wonderful Thursday. Michelle, thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Virtual applause for you. Thank you. Y'all have a great afternoon. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Michelle, I am so sorry. I have two different
Oh,
screens.
I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Thank you.